Today I'm joined by Benjamin Von Wong, a hyper-realist art conceptual photographer and the winner of the Content Branded Mastermind by Adweek. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Now, your photography and installations have garnered over 100 million views online. How would you describe your approach to photography and the message that you're trying to convey?
It's a great question. I find it really hard to describe my work. I think it's a lot easier if you just show someone. But for the longest time, I described my photography as art that looked like it was Photoshopped, but it's actually real. And so there's a sense of disbelief or wonder when you look at something and you're wondering, what am I looking at? What is it made out of? Is it real? Is it fake? And that's something that I've tried to maintain along with my installations. Most recently, all the work that I have done over the last couple of years have been sort of social impact, sustainability focused, with the intention of raising awareness for different issues.
I think that's a great cause, and let's get into it because I'm so fascinated by your work, and I love the medium that you're using. Now, you have a fascinating background because I believe you majored in mining engineering at McGill University, but then somehow transitioned to photography as a full-time career. Tell me about that journey and that process.
Yeah, so I studied hard rock mining engineering. I'm Canadian, so my dad's an engineer, and it just seemed like the sort of likely path to follow. And I never really wanted to be a mining engineer. I just didn't know what to do with myself. So when I went to university, it was very much I had to go to university as a good Asian son, and just chose the most convenient path possible. And so I ended up in engineering, graduated knowing that it wasn't what I wanted to do, but still had no better plan. So went ahead and worked for 3.5 years in the field. And so what prompted the shift was waking up one morning and realizing that this wasn't what I wanted to do in 10 years. I didn't want to get paid more sitting at a bigger desk. It just didn't sound appealing to me. And that even though I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, I better start looking. And so that kind of realization prompted the quitting, and somewhere around there I had been doing photography on the evenings and weekends, and came to the realization that if so during my entire time as a mining engineer, I was basically doing photography on the evenings and weekends. And so when I decided to quit my job, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I just kind of wanted to travel. And photography was sort of the free way to travel the world. I could basically go on social media, announce my intention to go to a city, teach a class, teach a workshop, create a project, get a little bit of money, get another ticket to somewhere else, and just kind of teach my way through the world. And sort of with sort of social media, I was able to suddenly become an international photographer by pure default of just shooting internationally, not because I was necessarily getting paid for it. And so that brought a little bit of, I guess, prestige and recognition with the whole thing along the way, just trying constantly to stay on top of my own game, becoming better and better of an artist. Not because I wanted to be an artist, it was just some really cool lifestyle to keep maintaining. But somewhere, I don't really know what the exact pivot was. It seemed like there was never any need, like my runway never quite ran out. I was able to kind of keep afloat. And so I just kept that game rolling for the longest time possible with sort of this side hope that maybe I would be able to make a living just having fun for the rest of my life. And so I eventually transitioned from just being a, I guess, influencer style photographer to becoming a commercial photographer, earning money from global campaigns, commercial campaigns, only to realize that it was something that just didn't quite motivate me. It didn't quite turn me on anymore. There was just something very meaningless about going out, creating something really extravagant just for money, or even without money, just creating extravagance for extravagance sake. And that's sort of what prompted the shift. I was reflecting back on the kinds of projects that I had found most meaningful, and I made a video that helped a little girl dying of a terminal degenerative brain disease raise $1 million over the course of a month and $2 million over the course of a year. And I just really felt like doing more projects where my life was contributing to something greater than myself. And so quest sort of began to figure out what that looked like, because my work, very fantastical, very surreal, almost stunt-driven. How does that actually play into making the world a better place? And so I kind of meandered about for months trying to find the right application for my skill set, until I eventually did my first project on climate change, where we went storm chasing and used storms as a metaphor for climate change. Second one was tying a model underwater, waiting for sharks to swim around to raise awareness for shark conservation. And then the third was putting a mermaid on 10,000 plastic bottles. And so this sort of created this flow. I realized that a lot of environmental problems require conceptualization in order to understand, because otherwise you're just looking at sad documentary images of a problem, or in many cases the problem is invisible, and so you can't really represent it unless you use some kind of adaptive interpretation. And so that's I guess I sort of stumbled into the impact space, never truly wanting to get into it as much as just going with the flow. With each new project I did to raise awareness for something, I learned about it and became more conscious myself. And here we are a couple years later, and that's all that I'm doing, is sort of raising awareness for different issues.
Wow, that is a lot to unpack, Ben. Really, let me just go back to the early part of what you were sharing. And this is actually, I think, very meaningful to anybody that's listening. And the reason is, what you're sharing is about one's journey in life. And what I love about the core message I took away from a quintessential and essential aspect is that you don't have to have everything mapped out. I have 2 kids, one in high school, one in middle school. And my older one in high school somehow feels like she has to map out everything in advance, and that it's a linear approach, when in fact it's not. And I think what you just shared through your very life and your journey is that it is very much serendipitous, and you allow for the flow, you allow for the discovery, you allow for the experiences to happen. And I think that's fascinating. And I have to ask you, and I'm going to continue to unpack what you just shared because there's so much, is that even though you're not in the field of mining engineering, I got to believe that what you learn from school, you do apply in your art installation. Is that correct?
Mining engineering was a really interesting thing for me. It was never my calling. I never put that much effort into being good at it. I'm sort of the maximum results, minimum effort kind of person, to the point where if my grades were too good, I'd work less hard than the following semester because it was a waste of energy. At the end of the day, I just needed to pass. But that being said, I think what school really allowed me to do was sort of the tangential skills. Problem-solving approach, for example, learning to tackle a problem, collaboration, learning to work with different classmates to kind of come to a common solution or goal in the lab or whatnot. Just these general ideas of being able to visualize 3D space, because minds are designed in, they're designed in 2 dimensions within a 3D space, so that kind of helps me visualize spaces a little better. It's kind of hard to say what my life would have been like should I have not gone to school, but I think like from a very linear perspective, not so much.
Understood. Now, the other theme that I heard is this notion of finding something that's meaningful. So, for example, when you were talking about doing some of the commercial projects early on, you felt that, yeah, sure, the money was good, and it would sustain you much longer than some of the other gigs that you were doing before that, but you felt that it was too commercialized. It was just, like I said, extravagant, and you were looking for purpose. And you mentioned the word specifically, something greater than yourself. Tell me a little bit more about that, and how do you know when somebody actually realizes that?
Sorry, what was the first part of your question? I
love.
Yeah, could you just repeat? Yeah, repeat
I love this interview, by the way, Ben. No, and I'm not cutting anything out, just because this is a lot of fun.
All right, no worries.
It's the fact that many times we do different kind of work for pay, obviously, because we have mortgages and certain liabilities. But how did you realize that you wanted to do something that was meaningful for you? And that also requires a bit of risk taking, in the sense that you know that commercial projects will sustain you and can be more predictable, but you chose to go a different path. So trying to understand kind of that thinking process that happens internally for you.
Right. I mean, when I quit my day job, it was this realization that I was being limited by the fact that I was physically tied down to a place, and I could only do what I enjoyed on evenings and weekends. And so that really spurred the notion in my mind of, is it possible to do something that you enjoy 100% of your time, or at least 90%, that isn't just on evenings and weekends? Like, why do people go through their entire lives like basically only dedicating what they enjoy, like 10 or 20% of their free time? And it just seemed like there might just be, I mean, with the advent of technology, the fact that we have all these privileges and choices, we live in a world of opportunity. Is there not a way to actually just do what you believe in 100% of the time and make a living out of that? I mean, there's this quote that I really like, which is, you can do everything right in life and you're still going to die. So why not do what you enjoy and then you're going to die? Life, I think, is made out of life isn't really a series of right or wrong decisions, but just a series of decisions and consequences. And with any step of the way, you can grow. It's all just a matter of perspective. And so I think my life direction has been very much this, can I stay true to myself? Can I stay true to something that I believe in? And initially, for me, it was this big question of like, can I just make a living as me, doing what I enjoy? And then once that felt like it was certain, I mean, nothing is certain in life, but it felt like, you know, no matter what, I could figure out how to earn money as an artist, at least get by. Then the next question came, well, life isn't just about getting by, like, what, there's got to be something greater. And so that's kind of the space that I'm trying to unpack now, which is, how can I as an artist create scalable impact? Can I scale beyond myself? And I feel like that's something that many artists don't think too much about. They're focused on survival, which is sort of this mentality of scarcity. And I think you see this very often, is that people have these, I mean, it's sort of a self-limiting belief. I don't remember the study, but it was done that the biggest difference between somebody who was rich and somebody who was poor was simply the belief that they could or couldn't do something, because they would skip out on opportunities that were right in front of them in favor of something more secure, because they didn't have that buffer. They didn't feel that comfort to take those risks or make those experiments.
I love the term scalable impact. That's so profound. Now, I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, which is this GoFundMe campaign that you did, or you collaborated to help this 4-year-old Eliza O'Neill, I believe. She was diagnosed with Sanfilippo syndrome type A, which I guess is a type of a genetic disease that causes death before they even reach their teenage years. What prompted you to get involved with that particular case versus, you know, hundreds of others that have, you know, somewhat similar situations?
I think it was just timing, honestly. I was in an airplane flying from Singapore to Malaysia, I believe. And it was just this weird email, which was like, hey, one of my friends one of my contacts had received this email saying like that this father was trying to raise $1 million in a couple months to save the life of his little girl. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, well, $1 million doesn't sound like very much, and I've never tried to make a video that raises $1 million, but I don't really have much to do once I get back to Canada. So I should just reply to this person and say like, hey, I'm game if they're willing to wait a month. Like, is literally that thought process. There's nothing more to that except to just give it a shot and try, and why not? And so my reply back was like, I have never made a fundraising video before, but if you're willing to wait, I'd be more than happy to come by if no one else makes a better offer. And lo and behold, no one made any offer whatsoever out of the, 100 over creatives that he had messaged. And so a month later, I flew myself over, did a talk to kind of cover the expenses, slept on their sofa for about 10 days, and made a video. And as much as I want to claim full credit for for raising the money, really all I did was I gave a man who is passionate and dedicated and committed the right tool for the job. Like, I really just helped facilitate that process, but they had put in the hard work. And so, I've received many messages as a result of that video from other parents who kind of want to make a difference, but they haven't done any of the legwork, or they're not willing to put in the legwork. And it's sort of like, I don't know, you're in the venture world, so it's like you can throw money at a founding team, but if they're not going to put in the work to get through the hurdles, nothing's going to happen. It doesn't matter if they have the best idea, right?
Great point. Now, one of the things that I drew upon is your desire to have that global impact. And one of the ways you do that is you actually collaborate quite a bit, not just with big companies like Dell, Starbucks, but also with NGOs like Greenpeace and Fashion Revolution, specifically to really draw big attention. Why do you think it's necessary that activists, artists like yourselves and others have to still work with these big brands and big names?
I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an artist. I'm not an Ai Weiwei or a Banksy, and so I don't think it's so much about working with a brand or company per se, as much as working with a bigger name initially to get going. And so that's so from a pure marketing and survival perspective, I think it's really important to collaborate with people who can help elevate your status, which then lead in more people with the same status to hire you on board. So that's a practical survival perspective. From a world changing perspective, I firmly believe in working with corporations, as well as nonprofits, or just all the different parts of the world, because at the end of the day, if we are going to solve anything, we require the participation of everyone. And so I don't think it's about being exclusive, but rather being inclusive. And so I've had people complain about oh, why are you working with Starbucks? They're a big contributor. They're a far bigger contributor than they are a solutions company, for example. And my answer is quite simple, is that I believe that it's better to reinforce good behavior than it is to just keep pointing the finger at what's bad behavior. If we can celebrate the little wins, if we can make, at the end of the day, these are people working at companies. If we can make the people who are working at the companies feel good about the positive initiatives, and the people who are spearheading these initiatives are getting the glory and are getting, these takeaway pieces that they can take home to talk to their kids about, that'll only help make future projects easier, which will help accelerate change. And so I think it's really important to involve as many people as possible, focus on the positive, celebrate the little wins, and if the big guys start doing it, the little guys will follow.
That's a great message, and you've encapsulated it so well. Well said. Let's talk about your most recent projects, The Parting of the Plastic Sea, hashtag Strawpocalypse, which is an installation made of 168,000 used plastic straws. I've looked at it, it's visually stunning. Can you give us a kind of an inside artist's view of your work and a little bit of behind the scene as well?
Yeah, I guess the Parting of the Plastic Sea is kind of it's a special project for me because it represents a little bit of a pivot. Prior to that project, most of my other work had been photography based, and so I would build these really large sets to raise awareness for an issue, and then it would be torn down almost immediately. Because at the end of the day, I was creating an image for myself. And the realization that, social media is changing. What used to work a couple years ago doesn't work anymore. Algorithms have changed. And so there's this massive prioritization towards content that is new. And so for me, moving into the installation space was an opportunity to continue to take the images that were important to me. So I can still take photos of my own installation. I can do these slightly crazier photo shoots. But it also gives everyone with a cell phone the power to take a photograph of their own. It gives anyone with a camera the ability to organize their own photo shoot and go there and use the set to raise awareness, because what else is someone going to use it for, right? So the Parting of the Plastic Sea sort of represented a confluence of just 1 year of trying to find the right stakeholders, partners, logistics in order to shift from a temporary, I guess, set building kind of model into one that was going to actually survive for 2 months. The actual creation process, I don't know. I can go on. I can go on from like the way beginning on how the whole thing started, but it might be a little bit of a long story. But it was basically broken down into a couple sections. There was the collection of all the used straws, which took about 6 months. There was the cleaning of the straws, which was done gradually, but we did a final rinse over the course of 2 days. The whole assembly process, the assembly and build, which took about 2 weeks. And then the final marketing that had to be like shoved into about 2 or 3 days, where we made two behind the scene videos, blog posts, press kits, had that all ready to go for a press launch event, which was really, really hectic. But and now it's been taken down. So while it wasn't, it 2 months goes by really fast. It feels like it's only been up for a really short amount of time. But I guess that's I have to celebrate the fact that it went from basically a set that used to last for 1 day, which has now lasted for 2 months. So that's a pretty big improvement. And I'm thinking of actually trying to find different ways to shift towards something that will either be completely modular and transportable, so that it doesn't ever need to be taken down, or to really start focusing on permanent installations, simply to create something that would be more durable.
Well, I would definitely be a fan and supporter of permanent installation, and I could see you having essentially, effectively, a kind of a permanent exhibition or / museum of your work.
Well, if you have any friends, let me know.
I think one of the things that's important is it's not only trying to be cutting edge, but it's the ability to take abstract concepts around climate change and sustainability, making it visceral, making it tangible, and the fact that they're interacting with it, and the fact that there is an experiential component to it. And I think that's a piece that makes it very important for them, because all of a sudden it's not a topic that they just became aware of, but now they can actually interact with that topic, that concept, that construct that's used to be fairly abstract. So I think it's a fantastic piece of work that you're doing. Now, in terms of just fact sharing, according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which worked with the World Economic Forum, by 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And I think it's some 937 million tons of plastic versus 895 million tons of fish. It's hard for us to reconcile that. And I know, because you travel a lot, and I'm sure you've been to places like Indonesia and other countries where they literally just dump trash into the ocean. Do you feel like since some of your artwork that's gone up, that people's awareness has risen and in turn has helped them to think about their individual behavior?
I wish there was a great way to quantify the impact of art, but I don't know how beyond user surveys. And those only represent a small subsampling of the population. And so whether you can actually track how that, even if, so for example, we ran a survey of the straw installation. And so we know that 80% of people were already aware of the plastic problem, but the installation helped change the perspectives of 91% of them, because they were able to see how small actions added up to make a big difference. But did that solve the problem? Did it result in more grassroots movements, cleanups, actual policy change, corporate involvement? I have no idea. I can only track the immediate sort of the first level of impact, but I can't continue onwards. So similarly, I'm doing a podcast with you now. It would be really hard for me to know who within your audience was inspired enough by the conversation to go look at the work, and who from that point forward decided to actually adopt some behavioral change. It's sort of impossible to know. But what I do see, though, is many nonprofits, many sort of, I guess, ordinary eco-conscious individuals reposting my work, resharing it, using it as an excuse to start new conversations that wouldn't otherwise happen. And so I think it's undeniable that there's some value to it. How much is still up for grabs, because I don't have a KPI, I don't have a product to sell, I don't, I don't know how to measure it.
Just a side comment is that even though you try and distance yourself from your past as an engineer, when I listen to you sound very much like an engineer mindset as well. So I love the fact that you base things on hard data and facts. So that's fantastic. Let's talk about your other recent work, which is the plasticophobia. Yeah, hopefully I'm saying that right. Which was created this cosmic cave in an Instagram trap made for 18,000 used plastic cups. What was your inspiration for this? And again, for those that haven't seen it, you need to go and search for it. It is incredible.
Thank you. The installation that I built out of 18,000 plastic cups was sort of a confluence of, once again, I mean, every one of these projects is a weird story. This story in particular started off with an invitation by the High Commission of Canada to do an art exhibit about ocean plastics in Singapore. And I told them, like, what if we created something unique instead of just showcasing old work? I mean, it would be so much more exciting if people had the opportunity to walk through one of these photographs as opposed to just look at them on a wall. And they said, that sounds great. We'll talk to the galleries to see if they can get you space, but, we don't have the money to fund something like that. And so she said, if you go out and find money, you're more than welcome to pull it together. So I reached out to one of my friends, Laura Francois. She's a social impact strategist out in Singapore, asking her, like, what were some locally relevant issues with regards to ocean plastics that would be, like, I don't know, culturally representative and as well as, like, physically possible to build. And so we stumbled across plastic cups as one of the products that are kind of unique to Singapore as a very developed, very rich Asian country, because like most of the other countries that have a plastic usage problem all tend to be, I guess, emerging markets. And so they can sort of justify the lack of education or the lack of technology to solve the problem. But Singapore, I mean, as a country that has the capability of actually passing laws to change culture, for example, not spitting anymore or gum, there didn't ever really seem to be a good excuse for it. But anyways, that's sort of beyond the point. But we thought that plastic cups regarding to food courts and hawker centers was a really interesting thing. Like, how many plastic cups were used in a dine-in setting, like not even taken away in this country. And so we went out, reached out to a bunch of different contacts trying to find the best way to collect cups, managed to get in touch with the National Environmental Agency of Singapore, who reached out to the hawker centers, 23 or 24 of them in total, who agreed to help us collect cups over a day and a half, brought them all together, assembled a team of volunteers, cleaned them, assembled them, and tried to figure out what to do with them from that point forward. And so the creative process in this one was a lot looser because we didn't have that much time or the need to submit a pitch to a client. And so we had full creative freedom. So a local artist by the name of Joshua Go and I just kind of sat down. I gave him the theme of like plasticophobia, which is a word that I invented, the phobia of plastics. It doesn't exist anywhere in any dictionary. I just thought it was like kind of a word that could use the existence, and if I could just start getting it used in different ways, maybe this could become a term in the future that people would use to describe a feeling of maybe the fear or disgust towards single-use plastics, which is something that felt like an interesting experiment. And the artistic process of just trying to find a way to do that, we were leaning on the feelings of tryptophobia, claustrophobia, so that's the fear of round holes, and the fear of tight spaces, and to see if we could just build an installation that sort of created those emotions. And the sort of cave design is the result of that. And so that whole project, I think, start to finish, was less than a month because there was just not that much time to pull it together. But the end results, so right now it's in the Sustainable Singapore galleries. Out of the survey that we sort of performed, it's like 90% of the people who interacted with the installation all heard about it through some other means. Like, it became like on the list of activities to do in Singapore and so forth. So it's attracted a ton of new foot traffic to them. We've got a ton of really cool selfies. You can go on Instagram and just search for the hashtag Plasticophobia to watch like all the different fun iterations that have come out of it. And I think most interestingly is that it seems to have garnered enough interest and response that this installation may continue to move on. So we're talking to different entities right now that are interested enough to see how they can host the installation for a longer period of time and tying it into an actually policy shift within the spaces that are hosting it. So I think that's the part that I'm most interested about, because I want to know something that had experienced a state change as a result of the installation.
That's powerful. That really is. Well, thank you very much for your work. Tell us about your next upcoming installation or project that you're working on.
That's a really great question. I don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, there are a huge number of malls that have reached out who are interested in sponsoring or commissioning an art installation because I think malls in general are experiencing a drop in foot traffic and they all want to start doing the right thing. And so if my installation can help spread a positive message and increase footfall simultaneously, I'm guessing that's the reason why they're reaching out. So that's been interesting. But it's sort of a first come first serve basis, and nothing moving forward right now has been committed. I am hoping to expand beyond solely working on sustainability issues, because I mean, there are 17 different SDGs. This whole thing is an ecosystem. The environment, struggles the environment face are directly correlated with poverty levels, for example. If there was more money in the world, I mean, to care about the environment at this stage and the way our economy is designed is a privilege, and so on and so forth. And so I'd love to find different ways to get involved in different social issues and expand beyond just collecting, cleaning, transforming little items into bigger items. And experiment with more storytelling formats, more tangible calls to actions, people who have technological solutions that just need clever marketing or storytelling behind it. But I do not know what the next one is just yet, and I wish I could tell you more, but I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to be in a month.
I understand. Well, as I'm thinking, I'd love to invite you to a clean tech forum in Stockholm that I'll be going to in May. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that there's going to be dozens and dozens of some of the best technologies around sustainable clean energy, including battery storage and so forth. But to your point, they really don't know how to market that. They're really, for the most part, PhD scientists that are highly skilled in their respective fields. But to take very difficult technical concepts and convey it in a way that everyday people understand, can interact with it, because ultimately at the end of the day, when we talk about the UN SDGs, so many of those have high correlation coefficients, and it all comes back at some point or another to energy. Energy is responsible for climate change. Energy is responsible for sustainable economic development. Energy is what gives us the opportunities to create and to improve ourselves and give us choice and opportunity. So I'd love for you to think about that, and we can talk about it offline.
Yeah,
Any
absolutely.
final comments or message that you want to give out to the audience?
I think that it's really empowering to think about what you can do and less focused on what is wrong with the world. I fully am aware that art is not going to change the world. I highly doubt that I'm actually going to end up moving the needle in any substantial way as an individual. But it's like the cumulative actions, it's the cumulative ripple effects of many people believing in the same thing that lead to the change that we all sort of want to see. And while I know that alone I can't do very much, I guess part of the reason I choose to market and create pieces that get visibility and that resonate with people is that ultimately at the end of the day, these act as signaling beacons so that I can find other like-minded people, like yourself, I guess, who care about these issues and who I can draw connections with, because you never know what the future holds. And it's very much about manufacturing the serendipity that you want to have. So if you want to be more involved in making the world a better place, if you want to be more involved in, I don't know, energy or responsible investing or any field, or even just art, people need to know that these are things that you care about. And the best way to do that is to actually start investing your own time and energy and knowledge into the things that you care about.
Well, on that note, I have been joined by Benjamin von Wong. It's been a real pleasure. He is a hyper-realist artist and a conceptual photographer, winner of many awards, including the Content Branding Mastermind by Adweek. Ben, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, sorry.
Hey, we'll keep that for the.
Yeah. That's a blooper. Okay.